Hey everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia back with the first episode of season number 5 of the Jungle Roar podcast here on the CLNS Media Network, brought to you by our great friends at Prize Picks. And what better way, there is no better way to kick off season numero 5 than welcoming back one of my very good friends on the beat and one of the best in the business, and I don't say that lightly, the one and only play-by-play voice of the Cincinnati Bengals, Dan Hoard, who is also very busy trying to get the Cincinnati Bearcats basketball program healthy again. They're on the right track. They have won 2 in a row in Big 12 play. They have a monster game coming up against the Utah Utes on Tuesday night at Fifth Third Arena. Dan, it is great to have you back on the podcast, opening up season number 5. How you doing, bud?
Trags, I'm great. Thanks for having me on. And you missed the most important aspect of my bio in the introduction, the first ever guest on the Jungle Roar podcast. I'm back. I'm still waiting for my 5-timers jacket, like Saturday Night Live. I'm sure you'll give me one at some point, but I'm very happy to be on with you again.
It will be orange with black stripes, of course.
Love it.
It'll be very similar to the, I believe, the inner workings of the Bengals Ring of Honor jackets, right? They have the black and orange stripes inside. That's right.
Yeah. Those are nice. They've really done a nice job with those. You can tell. Yeah, you can tell that the recipients are moved when they get their Ring of Honor jacket. So hopefully Dave Lapham is wearing one sometime next year. I'd like to see him be inducted in this year's class. He'll certainly get our vote as season ticket holders in the Hoard family. So my fingers crossed that this is the year that my partner gets in.
All right, let's move on to football offseason. That's where we are now, the day after Super Bowl 59. And I've been asking this of my last couple of guests here on the pod. Asked it of Richard Skinner a couple of weeks ago, asked it last week of James Rapine. And the question is, if you had a team, a Super Bowl team that participated this year, either the Kansas City Chiefs or the Philadelphia Eagles, which team would the Bengals most like to emulate going forward, and why?
Philadelphia, because they won the game.
That's an easy response.
But also because I think, they provided a blueprint for everybody for how you win championships. It starts up front. So the Bengals really need to improve their defensive line. They need to improve their offensive line as well, but to a lesser extent, in my opinion. You're set at the tackles. You're okay at center. You can upgrade the guards. But the defensive line has to get better. I think that is the number one objective in terms of adding to this roster. I guess the number one objective is keeping the guys you want to keep. But beyond that, in terms of adding personnel, you really have to attack that defensive line.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Dan. And obviously the conversation regarding Tee Higgins is going to dominate the headlines, and Jamar Chase until those deals get done. Do you have an inkling or a sense or an opinion on which way the Bengals should pursue those talks, those negotiations?
Well, we all have an opinion, I think. I think everybody in Cincinnati or everybody around the world that roots for the Bengals has an opinion on this subject. And my opinion has changed, quite honestly. If we had this conversation prior to last year, I would have said that T will play 1 year on the franchise tag and then move on. And I would have said that's the right move for the Bengals to make. I didn't think it was good business to devote that much of the snap to 2 wide receivers. My opinion has changed. Joe Burrow changed my opinion when he began campaigning for this following the Dallas game with 5 games to go. I think what I've come to believe is that if you pay Jamar and T, you're essentially guaranteeing that you're going to continue to be great on offense. Now, they could still be great on offense if they don't have T, but I think it's a sure bet if they do have T. And if you do that and you spend the amount of money that's going to take, then you have to go, younger and cheaper on defense. That's just the way it is. And I'm willing to do that if I'm the Bengals. trusting that Al Golden can develop young players, trusting that if they keep throwing enough high draft picks at the defense, they're going to get it right. We'll see if that's the way it ultimately goes, but that's my opinion on the subject.
Okay, let's say that, and the reports are out that from people like Adam Schefter that Tee Higgins is going to command between $28 and $32 million a year. To me, the bigger figure is what are Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase, and let's even go down that road, Trey Hendrickson, going to want in terms of guaranteed money? Because I think most fans now, or a lot of fans certainly that follow this pretty closely in the offseason, are aware of the fact that it's not so much the AAV, the average annual value of the contract, that matters and really concerns the Bengals. It's the guaranteed money, how it's structured, how it affects the cap. If you're talking about Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase, that is not necessarily a 50-50 split, or is it, of the guaranteed money? Do you think?
No, it's not. Jamar is at a different level, obviously. Jamar is going to be paid as the highest paid receiver in the NFL. And when Duke Tobin did his Q&A with Kelsey Conway from the Enquirer, he used the expression, there is a blueprint that has been established. And I think some people took that the wrong way, very much the wrong way, in thinking that Duke somehow said T's now going to take the same thing that Justin Jefferson just took. No, he wasn't saying that, but he's saying that those are the parameters, and then you add a little bit more because it's the next year, or maybe it's not a little bit, but you add more because it's the next guy down the road. That's Jamar's contract. T's contract can't be the same, both in terms of value or structure, but they're obviously going to have to guarantee him a big chunk of dough one way or another to get him to come back.
How much do you buy of the theory out there, Dan, that Tee Higgins does want to come back, not just to take a hometown discount, obviously not, but that he has the quarterback, in a Super Bowl caliber quarterback in place? He has arguably the best all-around receiver in the National Football League on the other side of him in Jamar Chase. Certainly he played that way this year with the rare Triple Crown in receiving. And he has an offensive coach in Zach Taylor. He has one of the great young minds in offensive play calling in Dan Picture, certainly in scheming in Dan Picture. How much do you think that factors in to Tee Higgins' decision-making? Beyond the number.
I think it factors in. I think it factors in a lot, and I think you left one thing out. T is happy. Don't mess with happy, right? Right. We say that in any line of work.
That's so true.
Don't mess with happy. But that comes with a qualifier because he's a professional football player with a limited time period to make as much money as he can. So do I think, based on the things that Joe Burrow has said, based on the fact that he changed agents, and based on some of the things that T has said, that he would be willing to take a little bit less? I do. I do think that his one consideration isn't to be, to make every last dollar he possibly can. Does that mean he's going to take a massive discount? I don't think there's any chance of that. So it's got to be close to what he could get on the open market. But I think because of great quarterback, chance to win a Super Bowl, running mate that he loves, and the fact that he's happy in Cincinnati on this team with this coaching staff, I think all of that adds up to making it possible that maybe he'll take a little bit less to make this all more possible for everybody.
In an interview that aired on Fox 19 just after the game ended on Sunday night, Super Bowl 59 ended, it was Tee Higgins telling Joe Danneman that he's done pretty much all he can. He'd love to return. That's obvious for all the reasons you and I have just mentioned. But it's out of his hands now. And it seemed like to me he was pretty much at peace in terms of doing everything he could up until this point to politic for the best case to return to Cincinnati. Now, truly, it is up to his representation and to the Cincinnati Bengals ownership and their front office to get the deal done.
I saw the interview that you're referring to, and it was great. But obviously, in my opinion, Trags, it was no different from Tee Higgins' interviews at training camp in July. He's been saying essentially the exact same thing for half a year. I would like to stay. I hope it will get done. If it doesn't, I'll move on and do my best somewhere else. So I think he's made it clear. If he can get the type of deal that he considers to be fair, he would love to be back. If they can't work it out, that's the way it is. It's pro football. He'll move on and he'll try to succeed somewhere else. So I think T honestly has been pretty consistent in his messaging from the very first day of training camp.
What were your biggest takeaways from Joe Burrow's messaging over Super Bowl week?
It goes back to the Dallas game, as I mentioned. I think we were all shocked in the aftermath of the win in Dallas when Joe, seemingly out of nowhere, began expressing confidence that they would re-sign T, talked about how he would do what was necessary, then a few days later referred to it as a need. That changed the conversation, in my opinion, and it changed my opinion on the subject. Since then, he's essentially been campaigning to, first and foremost, keep Jamar and T, and then to a lesser extent, Trey, and now Mike Gesicki. So Joe Burrow doesn't say anything without understanding the impact of his words. So I think he has really, tried to convince the public that it's possible. And I'm sure publicly and privately with the Bengals front office expressed how important it is to him to get it done if possible.
He also knows he's not the general manager. He also knows he's not the president of personnel, vice president of personnel like Duke Tobin is. He's not the executive vice president like Katie Blackburn is. Joe Burrow knows where he is in the organization and the organizational structure. He's the most important player. He's the franchise player. There's no questioning that. But he has told us on numerous occasions, when really pressed about it, that it's not his job. He can politic, like I said, he can position and get out there and do all the PR he can. But in the end, he knows it's not ultimately up to him.
True. But he had never done what he's doing this offseason or in the time period leading up to the offseason in the previous 4 years. This is the first time he has ever campaigned or made his case this strongly. Let's just think back to when they drafted Jamar and the local debate was Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell. Everybody kind of assumed that Joe would express his opinion to Duke Tobin that Jamar Chase is awesome, let's take him. But Joe never really said that publicly. He never came out and said, I really think this is the guy that we should take. He's really making his feelings known very strongly now. And I don't remember who asked him the question at Super Bowl Media Week when he was making the rounds on Radio Row, but somebody asked him about, having a voice in these matters. And he said, that's part of being a franchise quarterback. You work with your front office to try to build the best team possible. And I think we should be cautious about trying to frame this as Burrow putting the heat on the front office, like lighting a Bunsen burner under their tails, because they're very collaborative. Duke has already said they've met since the end of the last season. I think Joe has a great relationship with Mike Brown and the Brown-Blackburn family. So, they probably would prefer that maybe he didn't say some of the things he said publicly, but I don't think that this is an adversarial thing. I think we all believe that Joe Burrow not only wants to keep receivers that he trusts and players that he believes in, but ultimately wants to win a Super Bowl. And he's looking at this whole thing and he's made the calculated decision in his own mind. Keeping these guys is the right move going forward. Like I said, it means you're going to have to go cheaper and younger on defense. That's just the way it is. It can be done. So let's see if they are able to pull that off this offseason. But Joe has convinced me, so I'm very eager to see how it plays out.
Talking with Dan Hoard, the exceptional play-by-play voice of the Cincinnati Bengals. I want to tell you about Prize Picks, the very best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions, that's billions with a B, of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. All-Star Weekend for the National Basketball Association is almost here, and Prize Picks is the best place to win cash while watching your favorite players during the game and then Saturday night events like the three-point contest. Prize Picks embedded the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all the withdrawals are fast, safe, and yes, secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use that code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Back with Dan Hoard of the Bengals Radio Network. And yes, University of Cincinnati Bearcats athletics, football and baseball, basketball, to be specific. Dan, I want to talk about Trey Hendrickson a little bit and the kind of season he had and just how important it would be to bring him back under some type of contract extension.
He's your best defensive player on a team that didn't have a great defense. So you'd certainly like to bring him back. To me, Trags, it feels like this is going to come down to the length of the deal. Again, Duke, in his interview with Kelsey, said he deserves a raise. We'll give him a raise. We want to try to give him an extension, but it's not a matter of giving it to him. You have to agree to it. So I just feel like it comes down to length. He's 30 years old. If he wants 3 more years, would they do that? I don't know. That seems unlikely to me. If it's a couple, then I think that's something that they could probably get done. So I haven't talked to Trey about this or the front office for that matter, but just kind of knowing how the Bengals have historically treated players that reach their 30th birthday, particularly on defense, this feels like it's probably a length of the deal thing to me.
And the thing you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Dan, and I think it's critical for the Bengals, is to draft and develop defensive players. Because if you're going to sign your offensive players, and I heard Colin Cowherd last week make this reference to this theory of, again, what teams like the Eagles have followed, the blueprint, and that is you sign your best offensive players, you draft and develop defensively. And if the Bengals are going to do that, I think certainly they have the capital, the draft capital to do that. But the problem has been the productivity of the defensive players. I still think the jury's out on Chris Jenkins Jr. and McKinley Jackson, those two players in the middle of the defensive line. They were rookies last year, and at times, many times, they played like it. But I think they showed significant development and growth in the second half of the year, certainly in the last 2 months of the season, to warrant some promise for 2025. What's your feelings on what the Bengals have to do to really shore up other parts, especially in the front seven, to transform Al Golden's defense now into a defense that maybe they don't do what the Eagles did in the Super Bowl, but they certainly play with a lot more force?
I think the jury's still out on most of the guys they've drafted on defense over the past 3 years. So I haven't given up on Miles Murphy, DJ Turner, Dax Hill. I mean, fill in the blank on anybody basically they've drafted in the first few rounds over the last few years. And hopefully Al Golden is the guy that can get more out of them. I think we all love and respect Lou Anarumo. He did a phenomenal job in 21 and 22, but I think Lou's strength is game planning for next Sunday's opponent, putting in tweaks that confuse the opposing quarterback, as he's famously done to Patrick Mahomes on numerous occasions. I think for that to work as well as it did in 21 and 22, it takes a veteran group. I think younger guys have a harder time doing that on a week's notice. So I think, and time will tell, that Al Golden is probably better suited to play younger guys early and develop them. I hope I'm right. I think that's the bet that the Bengals are making in going with Al as their defensive coordinator. And it's not, a stab in the dark. He's got a lot of NFL experience, including 2 years on Zach Taylor's staff, so they know what they're getting in Al Golden. But I do think that if this salary structure is what we think it's going to be, a lot of money on offense, less money on defense, then Al Golden's probably the right guy for the job.
Two things stuck out to me about Al Golden, one of which actually one has to do with Al Golden, one with Lou Anarumo. The one about one aspect of Al Golden's introductory press conference, Dan, was when Golden made reference to how many freshmen or rookies, but freshmen in the college program at Notre Dame he had to work into his defensive structure, his defensive scheme, and get them on the same page quickly. And I think the obvious comparison with rookies in the National Football League is there to be made, that analogy to be made. And I think he understands that he's going to have to get these younger players on board quickly and on the same page and playing with aggressiveness and not thinking as much, but reading and reacting. The other aspect that comes to mind while you were talking there was what Lou Anarumo said a couple of years ago about playing rookies. He admitted he hated doing it.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I've been saying that for weeks. That totally came to my mind as well.
And he did not ever really feel comfortable in trusting his defensive schemes that he has plotted all week for this particular opponent, and trusting that these rookies get the concepts, the leverages, and the communication that you need on game day to execute it.
Totally agree with that. And I do think also where Al Golden is concerned, after the hire, most of us focused on the last 2 years, these great defenses he's had at Notre Dame, making the transition with young players, as he's likely going to have to do in Cincinnati. But I think we really should look at the overall resume for Al Golden. The dude took over Temple when it was at its absolute lowest and had them in a bowl game in like 3 or 4 years. They didn't win as big at the University of Miami as he hoped, I think largely because he came in when they were on probation.
Mitigating circumstances for sure.
100%. The dude is a ball coach. He was an excellent head coach. He's been an NFL tight ends coach. He was excellent with the Bengals linebackers in 20 and 21. He's been exceptional as the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. This guy can coach. I think it's going to be a big help to what Cincinnati has to try to do to elevate the defense to the level it needs to be to contend for a Super Bowl title.
Do the Bengals have to get tougher through the draft and free agency in terms of the players they're drafting and bringing on board?
I think they need to get bigger. Maybe that's tied into toughness to a certain extent. But I think in the AFC North, where those 6 games have such a big impact on your ability to make the playoffs and your ability to host one or more playoff games, they just weren't big enough inside, particularly on defense. They've got to get bigger. So that's, partly in the drafts. I would like to see them sign an experienced run-stopping type defensive tackle, add him to the mix. I don't think they had enough girth inside after losing DJ Reader. I think they need to get that back.
Yeah, and I think, and I can't remember them right off the top of my head, but the Eagles have a couple of free agents that could be hitting the market. And I think if you're looking to steal from the best, I think that's always a great place to start. Now, who knows what the asking price will be, and who knows what the Bengals will even have available to them after getting done with Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins, hopefully, and Trey Hendrickson, hopefully, but that certainly is a great place to start. Any other issues that you think the Bengals need addressing this offseason that come to mind beyond the coaching and the talent and the roster building?
Well, they have quite a few free agents, and those other guys have been buried by the discussion of Jamar, T, and Trey, rightfully so. Those three guys are superstars, and the other players that we're talking about don't necessarily fit that description. But what about B.J. Hill, Mike Hilton, Mike Gesicki? I feel like I'm in the minority and in a significant minority in wanting Mike Hilton back. It seems like everybody said, he's 30, he's undersized, his coverage skills aren't as good as they used to be. All of that's true. I still think he's one of the best slot corners in the NFL, close to the line of scrimmage, great blitzer, good tackler in the run game, extremely impactful during the 5-game winning streak at the end of the year when Lou Anarumo really cut him loose and had him attacking the line of scrimmage on just about every down. I would love to see Mike come back. It would have to be on a short-term deal. He would have to probably take less from the Bengals that he could get from somebody else. But I feel like I'm kind of the lone voice crying out in the wilderness in hopes that Mike Hilton is still part of this team going forward.
We didn't talk much, Dan, about Scott Peters, the new offensive line coach, and Jerry Montgomery. Both come from New England, where they both spent 1 year with Gerard Mayo and now get a change of scenery. I think the Jerry Montgomery one is fascinating to me because of the way Zach Taylor really built him up and was really impressed with his, I believe, 9 seasons in Green Bay. What do you think a guy like Jerry Montgomery can bring to a new look Bengals defensive line?
I did a lengthy podcast with Jerry after the Bengals hired him, and the biggest thing that stood out to me in our conversation was him emphasizing the need for an interior pass rush. He talked about that as being one of the strengths of his Green Bay teams, and that didn't necessarily mean there was a Geno Atkins-like guy that got double-digit sacks, but they consistently got a push inside that helped the outside guys ring up higher sack totals. And let's face it, that has not existed for the last few years in Cincinnati. I mean, DJ Reader had his moments where he pushed the pocket. I think in the Super Bowl year, Ogunjobi was great at putting pressure on quarterbacks before he got hurt in the Raiders playoff game. So that was the most exciting thing that I took out of that conversation with Jerry Montgomery, trying to get an interior pass rush. He was a defensive tackle and as a player and a very good one at the college level. So if he can coach that a little bit better or scheme it a little bit better and get more oomph from their interior pass rush, that would make a huge difference.
I think that'll be a wrap for me. What do you have on plan? I guess you have the Bearcats basketball program, Dan, for the next, 7-8 weeks, you hope?
I hope. That would be nice. That would be nice. It's 4 weeks of the regular season plus the conference tournament. I think they'll play at some level of the postseason. I haven't given up hope that it's going to be the NCAA tournament, but let's hope that the dodgeball game that they played 1 week ago today that led to, or at least contributed to, back-to-back double-digit wins last week continues. I don't know if Yahtzee's on the table at practice today or what they're going to do for team bonding leading up to the game against Utah on Tuesday night. But that button that Wes Miller pushed seemed to make a difference. Everybody relaxed, had fun, just kind of got the mounting pressure of a 4-game losing streak off of their shoulders. And I don't think it's the best team in the Big 12, but they're certainly a lot better than they were playing. And they probably have to go 6-2 in their last 8 to feel like they are, right back into the NCAA tournament picture. So that's challenging, particularly with road games at Iowa State and Houston still to come, but it's not impossible. This team is good enough to possibly pull that off.
10-10 in the Big 12. If you had told me that before the season began and you scratched 20 wins, I think that might have been an NCAA playoff team. the 2-8, overcoming 2-8 is a big mountain to climb. But you know what? To mix metaphors and mix sports here, Dano, if the Bengals could do it at 4-8, I think the Bearcats are certainly capable. Ironically, also right now 4-8 in the Big 12.
Exactly. The Bengals won 5 in a row when they were 4-8. So let's see the Bearcats win 5 in a row. And getting back to the point you made a moment ago, 10-10 in the Big 12 regular season would guarantee an NCAA tournament spot. Nobody that's gone 500 in this league has missed the tournament for several years. West Virginia was 4 games under 500 in the regular season a few years ago, and they were a 9 seed. So 10-10 would definitely do it. 9-11 with a couple of wins in Kansas City at the conference tournament might do it, depending on how the bubble looks. So let's begin with win number 3 in a row against Utah on Tuesday.
I think I'm going to go out and get a cup of coffee. Do you know why that is, Dan? Is that a cup of coffee behind you on the wall?
Yes. So that is a cup of coffee. It's a sculpture by an artist named Barrett DeBusk. We have a couple of them in our house. I saw this years ago, probably 20 or 25 years ago in New Orleans, where he has a gallery. My wife and I love that coffee cup. I'm in my kitchen. We have another one in our family room that's really cool. So they are these wire sculptures that he does, and we love them. It's really cool, right?
Yes, it is, and it's inspiring me to go out and to my favorite establishment and get a cup of coffee after I finish producing this Jungle War podcast, episode 1 of season number 5, just like it was way back in the day, season number 1, episode number 1, with the one and only Dan Hoard. Dan, you're the best. Thank you.
Trags, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy it.
All right, he is Dan Hoard. Does a great job on the Bengals radio network as the play-by-play man. Also, of course, as we spoke of, the play-by-play voice on Bearcats football and basketball. This episode of the Jungle Roar podcast brought to you by the great folks at Prize Picks and CLNS Media. For Dan Hoard, my name is Mike Petralia Trags. Until the next time, keep that jungle roaring.